I'm looking at 1-5 Tennessee with an interim head coach, interestingly enough, just in time for Vrabel to pull back into town as the AFC East division leader. Browns 1-5, Dolphins 1-5, Saints 1-5, a handful of 2-4 teams. I only mentioned this along with the 1-5 Ravens. Anybody who's playing this week, playing their way into being sellers as opposed to anything else in the trade deadline that looms. I know you and the guys talked about this a little bit early on this week, but what about now that we're on the cusp of losses that could actually affect something? Tom.
Well, let's start with the Titans. They have been open for business. They traded Jarvis Brownlee a couple weeks ago, but that was a pretty specific type of situation. They're willing to listen on just about everyone on the roster. Yes, we talked about it with the guys. Like, I don't think that they deal Jeffrey Simmons, but in a position like the Titans are, when you're in the midst of a large-scale rebuild, the early stages of a large-scale rebuild, you kind of are willing to listen to anything. Calvin Ridley would be another logical target. He's out this week because of his hamstring injury, which makes the situation that much harder to try to get Cam Ward going. But the Titans will be there. We've got 18 days till the trade deadline. Doesn't mean that they're going to, go full fire sale and make 8 different trades. But in terms of listening to calls, they're absolutely already in that mode. I do not get the sense the Saints are open to listening at this point. Mickey Loomis has never been a big sell at the trade deadline guy. He feels like, I've got the players. There's a lot of long-time types of guys on that team. We heard Alvin Kamara say it yesterday, and Ian reported this last weekend that they'd come to him like, hey, we got interest in you. Would you want to be traded? Kamara said no. He said yesterday if he finds out that they traded him anyway, he'll just go drink a pina colada on a beach somewhere rather than playing for a different team. So I certainly anticipate
that might change if the Kansas City Chiefs hand him a uniform, Tom. That might change if the Chiefs hand him a uniform. You know what I mean?
Kamara's
come on now.
He's a unique guy, though. He loves the city, and you just have to get there. I mean, I haven't fully crossed him off the list, but it sounds like that's not something they're looking to do. The more logical targets would be, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. But again, the sense I've gotten is that they are not in any way in sell mode at this time. You heard Mike McDaniel earlier today saying that, any suggestion that Dolphins players are on the trade block is false. That makes sense for the moment because, listen, they got to win some games. They got a big one this week against Cleveland to quiet down all the noise that was largely created by their quarterback this week. They got a bunch of veteran pass rushers between Bradley Chubb, Matthew Judon, Jalen Phillips. They've obviously got Jalen Waddle. I don't get the sense at this point they're eagerly looking to trade any of those guys, but if 1-5 becomes 1-6, 7, 8, certainly there's going to be a lot of calls that are made to Miami. With Cleveland, they clearly are already willing to make trades, not just trading Joe Flacco to Cincinnati, but they traded Greg Newsome in a deal for Tyson Campbell that was an unusual trade, but makes sense when their vision is on 2026 right now. Greg Newsome, who was in a contract here, probably wasn't going to be a part of that, so you get a cost-controlled Tyson Campbell in return. There potentially could be other players the teams target. We know we've heard David Njoku on 20 different occasions over the past few years. It's one of Andrew Barry's favorite players. I don't know that he'd be traded, plus he's out this week because of an injury, but players like that, I would anticipate that there are calls. And then, you got other teams like the Raiders. At some point, do they go into sell mode? They won last week. They're not completely out of it in a wide open AFC West where nobody's better than 4-2. But if you get a couple of weeks further down the road here, do they end up trading to Jacoby Myers, who it sounds like his status is up in the air for this week because he's got a knee injury that he's dealing with here. They're not going to trade the big ticket items. Max Crosby just did a new deal. He's not going anywhere. I don't think that there's a market for Geno Smith, even if they wanted to trade him. And I've not gotten any indication that their plans for Geno or anything out of play through it and keep him as QB1. The Jets is the other team, 0-6 at this point. Again, you'd like to think you're building some type of momentum here and just get something going in the right direction. But, the only significant trade that they've made thus far was acquiring Jarvis Brownlee, who's actually played pretty well for them far this season. But they got a bunch of tradable assets on that roster. Breece Hall is the one that a lot of the focus will be on leading up to the deadline. Would they be willing to listen on Quinn and Williams? Again, there's not a lot of players, Rich, and this is not me reporting like, hey, they'll trade Quinn and Williams. I just know this.
Sure.
There's maybe a few dozen players in the entire NFL that are off the market. Everybody else, there's a price at which any team is going to go, that's pretty good value for that guy. But I think one of the things to point out here, and I've had this discussion with a bunch of GMs this week, is how quiet it's been this week, just 18 days now until the deadline. Usually you'd start to see, and we saw a few trades last week, but that's driven in large part from the fact that there's not that many teams that are completely out of it. Even the likes of the Raiders are sitting there going, we got a chance to get back into this thing. Let's see what we can do. A lot of these trades, if they happen, might come right after Halloween, right after, and as we lead up to that deadline that's on the Tuesday, I think it's November 4th, you might be really up against that before you see some of these deals. But again, whoever loses in the Miami-Cleveland game this weekend, if Tennessee, if the Jets, if the Saints, those teams sink over these next week or two here, things could always ramp up quickly, but it is pretty quiet right now.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.